Welcome back, everybody. So, previous video, we kicked off our series where we're talking about dynamic thumbnails. So, whole purpose of this series is we're going to be showing you how to use Python to generate thumbnails that are dynamic, right? So, something about the thumbnail is changing constantly or on some cadence. And what we're going to be doing is then take that new thumbnail after we've changed it and then upload it to a particular video on YouTube. And so kind of the whole reason behind this was I saw a video on YouTube over Thanksgiving and it kind of inspired me. I said, oh, I wonder how you could do that. And so one simple thing that I obviously knew metrics I had right off the top of my thing was subscriber count, right? So the whole idea behind this is you could create a thumbnail where you have some type of goal. Maybe it's views, maybe it's likes, maybe it's, oh God, I don't know, like planting trees, donation thresholds, I don't know, something about it. But basically you want somebody to be aware of that constant change, but you're leveraging your thumbnail in order to do that. So what we're going to be doing is I have a thumbnail template that I'm going to talk a little bit through. The only reason I'm going to talk through it a little bit is because we need to know the structure of thumbnails, and or at least I would say artboards more specifically in the world of Adobe Illustrator. If we don't, then it's going to be really hard to write the code for it because we're going to have no idea of the structure behind it. And then additionally, we'll talk about just what does that look like, interacting with it, and then we'll start slowly writing the code in order to actually interact with our thumbnail. I'm assuming you have Visual Studio Code on your system. If you don't, I would recommend you install it. If you have some other, IDE, go right ahead for it. I'm going to create a new window. And then from here, if you go to your source control pane right here, you're going to do clone repository. So you're going to go to your clone repository. Then you need to provide the URL to the repository that you want to clone. Well, if you remember in the previous video, I showed you the library we're going to be using. So this is the one I use to manage my own channel. So if you want that, by all means, clone it, especially if you're a YouTube content creator like myself. It's probably going to help you a ton because it helps manage a lot of the stuff you do. And if you're like me, you want to automate as much as possible because you hate doing tedious stuff. All right, so you clone it. You're going to press open. And then once it's opened, basically you have everything here. Now, couple things you need to keep in mind is a lot of the times when you're working with things like APIs, when you're working with things where you might require something that's sensitive information, things like credentials. Normally, I have what I call as a config folder in here, right? So a config folder is just simply short for configuration. With a configuration folder, you can store sensitive information and then basically you just never push it to the repository. So right now, you'll notice over here, there's no configuration folder. That's because I don't put that publicly, right? I don't want people to see my stuff. So I'm going to copy the old one that I have, and I'm going to put it in here. And I'm going to paste it. Now, inside of here, it's just things like credentials and stuff like that. I have plenty of templates out there where it comes to creating config files. I've pretty much covered this topic a lot. And again, I'm assuming you've watched the YouTube API series because that's really important for this series. Again, there will be a link down in the descriptions below. But basically, I just put my config files in here. They do contain sensitive information, so I won't be showing them on screen only because they contain things like API tokens and stuff like that. But if you want like just a general idea of like, how do I create these things? I do have some samples that you can use. So it's probably just easier to type it, but you'll notice I have something called Sigma template. So this is what I use for basically all my repos, right? So this is just my template that I use. You can actually fork this yourself if you wanted to, but if you go in here, you'll notice I have a config folder, and then inside of here, I show you basically how to write your config file. So you just basically have to have your sections. Your sections have values, and then you just simply associate your value with whatever the actual value is, and then you can write it. And then from here, you would just read it after this point. So this would create a config file for you. It's only one item in it. But if you need like a template, use that one just because I provide it for you and you can, use it however you want. But again, very important that you know that usually when I work with config files, it's because I have sensitive information. I can't share it on YouTube because then anybody could access my account. But I do want you to know how I'm structuring it. Okay, from here, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you this particular template inside of Adobe Illustrator, right? So we're going to be using Adobe Illustrator to work with our particular thumbnail. However, when we're working with Adobe Illustrator inside of Python, because there is this kind of object hierarchy behind the scenes, it makes a little bit more sense to explain what that hierarchy looks like and how we'll need to think about certain parts of our thumbnail. Because if you don't think about it correctly, it can come back to bite you. So if you're like me, you want to make sure you can see it all in the same thing. Once it kind of stops glitching on me, just do fit artboard in window. Okay, so here's my thumbnail, right? Right now, I'm sitting inside of the Adobe application. Pretty much every time we've worked with PowerPoint, Excel, anything that's related to COM objects, you start at the application level. So in this situation, you would go to the Adobe application, and your Adobe application can have things called documents. Guess what? We're currently in a document, right? So this entire document, so my thumbnail helpmegrow.ai, that's a document. So you start at the application, you grab your document. Inside of your document, you have things called artboards. Your artboards are basically what you're looking in front of you, right? So your artboard is this, right? So this is my artboard. This is where I'm creating content. I'm making it look pretty. That's on my artboard. So you start at application, you go document, you go artboards. That's when things change because depending on what types of objects you're using, it's going to change the hierarchy a little bit. So right now, I have my artboard. My artboard is made up of different objects, right? So I have my background object. I have my icon, which is right over here. This is made up of smaller objects that are basically just path objects. So these are called path objects. I have something called text frames. Text frames contain, you guessed it, text. You access text inside of a text frame using the text range property, and I'll show you how to do that. But at this point, I want you to start thinking about just the overall hierarchy, right? So application, document, artboard. Once you're at your artboard, that's where things can kind of get different because your artboards are usually made up of multiple objects. So multiple objects can define an artboard. Really what you have to ask is what type of object is on my artboard? You can have different types. We've already seen this. So we have text frames. We have path items. You have, I think a thumbnail background is also considered a path item, I believe. I'll have to double check. But the main takeaway is artboards are usually made up of multiple types of different objects. Now, some objects also have their own unique hierarchy, right? We saw this with text frames. Text frames are composed of text range. A text range is composed of words. A word is composed of characters. So you just notice how I'm going one level down and basically I'm just getting finer and finer details. And each one of those objects can have their own methods and properties, right? Sometimes, like we just mentioned, a particular object can contain a collection of other objects. And this shouldn't be anything super new because we've covered this in Excel, VBA, and other things, which is, you have multiple objects that belong to your collection, right? So a text range is made up of multiple words. So we have a word collection. Words, you put an S at the end, usually it's a collection. A word is made up of multiple characters, right? So a characters collection is basically multiple character objects. That's important because when it comes to formatting our characters, sometimes we might want to be specific, right? So I'm going to show you that, hey, we only want to highlight this one and that one. So it's just really important to understand that natural hierarchy behind the scenes, because if you aren't aware of it, it's going to be a little bit intimidating at first to work with it because some things aren't going to work the way you might be used to in other COM objects, right? with Excel, it was kind of intuitive, right? You could kind of think about it. With Adobe, it's intuitive, but if you're not coming from a design background, it's not super intuitive sometimes. Like myself, I'm not super design oriented, as you can tell. Look at my wonderful colors, but that's important. So I just wanted to make sure we covered that, because if we didn't, it would have been a little bit confusing once we start writing some of our code. Okay, so we'll go back to our little repository over here. There's a couple things that you need to do before we actually start writing the code. Is I would actually recommend that you locally install this particular repository on your system. The only reason I say that is if you wanted to leverage the code that you're seeing in this repository and possibly another project on your system, there's not really an easy way to do it unless it's locally installed. The other additional benefit of having it locally installed is that if you wanted to change this code to maybe suit your own unique requirements, the benefit of doing the local installation is that you can then immediately reflect those changes on your system, right? So the idea behind it is you could go in here, you could edit your code right away, and then you could reflect those changes in your other project if you plan to use it with your other project. It's getting that time where my night light's coming on, so I have to turn it off. Okay, so that's just really important to locally install the repository. It would be pip install -e space then period. Additionally, any requirements that are necessary for you to use this library would be in here as well. So if you don't have requests, for example, or if you don't have some of the Google OAuth libraries and stuff like that, if you do a local install, the benefit of doing that is it's going to then install all the requirements. Oh, I already had Py132 in here. Interesting. I don't know why it didn't like it, but okay. So that's just something I wanted to make sure you were aware of. You do want to make sure you do a local install as well. And then from here, you can actually create your new script. So you would just do new file. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to just basically say create dynamic thumbnails. Woo. 2 years, man, 2 years. Goodness, goodness, goodness. Where does the time go? It's all fun. Okay, so we're going to start off by importing the libraries that we're planning to use. The first one is going to be regular expression. We're going to be searching for certain words inside of our thumbnail. Regular expression just kind of makes doing things like finding the starting and an ending point just a little bit easier than just a traditional find. So we're going to be using that library. We don't technically need JSON, but we're going to just import it just because I tend to find that I use it down the road. Text wrap, there's a lot of things. Obviously, one thing you really have to be careful about is writing the text inside of Python. It's going to look sometimes very different than what it's going to appear inside of Adobe Illustrator. Things like indents, things like line breaks. So I'll talk a little bit about that once we get to that point. But text wrap just tends to help alleviate some of that confusion and some of the challenges that come with writing the actual text inside of Python and then exporting it to something like Adobe Illustrator. You could leverage even applications like Word that's outside of the scope of this, but you could technically do that as well. We're going to be doing some printing as well. So guess what? We're going to be importing Printy Print. Oh, where we go. We're going to also be using the config parser module as well, only because obviously I need to import my credentials. So this is the library we're using for it. We're going to now import the custom library that I wrote. So I'm going to say from youtube.client import YouTube client. So this is going to be our main object that we're going to be using to interact with the YouTube API. And then additionally, we're going to be importing the Adobe kind of module as well. And then from that particular module, we're going to be importing the Adobe Illustrator object. This is to basically represent the Adobe Illustrator application. From here, we're going to import my credentials. Again, I'm assuming that you do have these credentials yourself. So first things first, grab configuration values. It's always fun. This is always the best part of writing your code is loading credentials. Because if you're like me, I've done this a couple times where I've shown my credentials on the video and then I had to take down the video or start over the video, which is never fun because it's usually a time-consuming process. But you got to do it a few times in order to not do it again. So we initialize a new config parser object. We call the read method, and we just want to make sure we're pointing to the folder and then the file that's inside of there as well. So that's just basically saying we want to read that file. Once you're reading the file, you can start loading the individual values that you need for your script. So you can just say grab the values. In this situation, I do have an API key. So this one, I need to get config.get. So get method. Everything is ordered by section. So I'm going to go into my main section, and then I need to specify the key that contains the value I want to pull. So I have a key called API key, and then that will return the actual value that's associated with it. And I'm basically going to just copy and paste this a couple times because I need a bunch. I need my state path. Kind of like my TD Ameritrade API library, I store my credentials in a specific location if I don't store them in my environmental or in my system environment. So I have basically my state path is basically just a file path pointing to that JSON file. Channel ID, I mean, that's not really something that I need to do sensitive. It's not really a sensitive issue. I don't need that one. I don't need playlist ID. I don't need that. Well, I'll keep this only because I don't know if it's going to fail if I don't have that. So there was some stuff just, so you kind of get to hear my thought process a little bit. There's a lot where I was doing stuff very specific to my channel, and YouTube through the API makes it actually really easy to just reference your own channel. So sometimes I do leverage this, and there's also going to be another one called playlist ID. So every YouTube person has what is basically called your master. I mean, I don't know if it's really called master, but it's basically a master playlist that has every single video you've ever uploaded. The only reason I go to that one is if I need to get every single video I've ever uploaded and the content from it, I would go to that one before I would go to the individual playlist. So that's basically referencing my master playlist. Anybody can actually see it. It's a public one. I think it's like way down at the bottom though. And then additionally, we have something called a client secret path. So this also points to another credential file, which has things like my application ID and stuff like that. So you need that along with your access token and your refresh tokens in order to basically get authenticated with the API. Additionally, just so some of you are aware when it comes to working with the YouTube API, I specifically reached out to YouTube and said, hey, can you give me more quota? Because I have like 350 videos. And anytime I need to update all of them, I blow through my quota in like no time at all. So YouTube limits it, I think, if I remember correctly, like 10,000 calls a day or something like that. But they have like these weird ways of measuring it. They're like, so if you make one API endpoint, that's like considered 5 calls. But then if you do another one, that's like 10 calls. So basically doing different operations results in different amount of calls. So I had to up mine to like 40,000 or something like that. So they were actually really nice about it. They've been a lot better than Facebook. Facebook don't even get me started with Facebook. Alrighty, so let's create a new instance of the client, of the YouTube client to be more specific. So whenever you want to create a new instance of this, it's pretty straightforward. You just create a new variable. In this case, we'll call it YouTube session. This one I'm going to call the YouTube client object. And then you can see here, this is basically just giving you an overview of kind of how to use it and the arguments. So pretty much all of these you do need to provide. And then I try to give you an example as well. So you can see this as well. So if I wanted to, I could even copy this, which is neat. Oh no, I did copy paste again. Damn, sorry. Let me try that again. Bam. So super easy then, and then you can just kind of leverage it yourself. And that way, save some time. Now, obviously the code's on there as well, so you don't have to worry about that as well. Channel ID, and we're gonna also be doing the client secret path as well, client secret path, and then our state path. Ooh, what fun stuff. So, and then from here, something I do specifically is I want to grab my channel data. So I'll kind of just take a brief second to kind of tell you some of the endpoints that are available that at least I have. These aren't all of them. YouTube has a bunch of endpoints, but these are just the ones that I primarily use. So all this is just related to authentication. So I handle the refresh token for you and stuff like that. You don't have to worry about it then. Here's your main request body. So this actually handles all the request. So if you ever need to modify it, that's basically where it's at. Load file, load. So some of these are just not useful. So like, for example, playlists are made up of something called playlist items. Those are the individual videos in your playlist. So this one will return all the items for a particular playlist ID. Sometimes playlists have like 30 or 40 playlists. So like your main one, for example, like your main playlist is going to have like 40 pages. So this one will return all of it. There's update video, so you can update the different parts of the video. So if I need to go and update descriptions and stuff like that, this is how I do it. Update playlist, so you can update which videos are in the playlist. Insert playlist, so this, I believe, creates a new playlist. Update playlist items, so individual videos inside of a playlist. You can delete playlist items, insert playlist items, upload a thumbnail. So we're going to be using this one. So this is how I upload thumbnails. Grab a playlist, grab my channel. So this is if you want things like statistics about it, snippets like text and descriptions and stuff like that, content details. This is what you would use. You can clear all the items from a playlist. So this is just me specifically. There were certain times where I wanted to delete every item from a playlist and then reorganize it so it was in the right order. So I would use this one. Grab playlist, so multiple playlists at once. Grab channel playlist, so this is like your master one. Grab videos. Grab comments. This is something new for me that I'm kind of exploring. Like to do some sentiment analysis. Parse playlist IDs. This is just condensing it. A lot of times you get a bunch of information out there and it's a little bit overwhelming. So for example, these are what they look like. And you go like, oh my goodness, there's so much stuff in here. I don't need 90% of the stuff. So I go through and I parse out the stuff that I need. So just wanted to show that in case some of you were curious. But the one that we're going to be specifically calling is grab my channel subscriber data. So I'm going to show you how to kind of navigate to where you need to get to. So I'm going to say my channel data equals YouTube session. And then it's going to be grab my channel. With this one, when you make requests that usually require data, YouTube defines it in parts. So a resource object, right? So something like a playlist item, that's considered a resource object. A resource object is made up of parts, right? And so if you look at the individual parts, you can see your items. So here's your snippet part. You can have content detail parts, in some cases status. So it just depends on the resource object. You don't technically need all of this. If you just wanted subscriber data, it's actually super easy. You would just pass through statistics. Keep in mind, the more parts that you ask for, the more quota you're using. So if I add in content details, I get charged for both. If I don't, I only get charged for statistics. So just keep that in mind when you're working with the data. So I'm going to do my channel data, and then I'm going to respell this because it's spelled wrong. And then from here, let's run the script again just to see if we can get some information out of it. Beautiful. So you can tell because I didn't do because I didn't do snippet, I actually got a lot less back. But you can see there's things like your ID. This is basically my channel ID, likes, favorites. I don't know. What is all this? Content details? Oh, related playlist. Oh, interesting. Interesting. So I have a favorites playlist. I didn't even know that. Okay. Oh, wait, no, I do. I have a favorites playlist, but that's my personal. So you can't see that, but only I can see it. And then if you notice here, there's statistics, right? So I go, if you think about this, I have to go from items, go into a list, and then I have to get basically the particular key, and then I have to go down. You can see right here, I have 351 videos. It's a ton. I mean, I've seen other ones like, who was it? Excel is Fun. Like he's got like well over 1,000. And then you can see view count. What is that? 1 million views. Woo! It's a lot. So if I wanted to grab just the subscriber count, let's just say subscriber count, that's going to equal I want it to be an integer. So this is technically a string right now. I don't want it to be a string. I want it to be an integer. I'm going to go to my channel data. I'm going to go to items, the items portion. The items is made up of a list. There's only one item in that list. So I'm going to do index of 0. I'm then going to go to statistics, the statistics portion. And from that particular kind of subset, I'm going to grab my subscriber count. Let's just make sure it is, and we'll see what happens. Okay, perfect. So that looks fine. I'm happy with that. So I grab my channel subscriber data, grab the real-time, well, not necessarily real-time subscriber count. They used to be real-time. Now they update it on every 100 threshold. I don't know if it changes as your channel grows, but that's currently what it's at. So we got our subscriber count. From here, I'm going to start defining the parts of my text for my thumbnail, right? So I need text for this frame, and I need text from this frame. Technically speaking, there's no reason I can't put this all in one frame. But just for diversity's sake, I want to show you just how to select different frames and what that looks like. But again, technically speaking, you can have all your text in one frame. I'm just being a little bit, I don't even know what to call it. I'm just being a little bit creative to show you different things, right? So let's define the text that will go in this portion. So let's do this. Let's do this. Set the text for the current subscriber frame, right? Nothing super crazy. I'm going to give us some space so it's a little bit easier to see. So we'll say current subscriber text. It's going to equal double quotes. I'm going to put a placeholder, and I'm going to give that placeholder a key. And I'm going to give that key called current subs. So I'm going to put a placeholder there, and then I can reference it using the key. And I'm going to say current subs so far. Blah, 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 blah. Current subs equals, and so here's the important part. I want to format it so I get my commas. I want it to look pretty. So I need to do some more formatting. In this one, I'm going to do colon and then comma. So this is just how you make a number, have commas for 1,000 separators. So that's all you need to be aware of. And then it would be format again. And then in this case, it's current subscriber count. Or in this case, subscriber count. So this would create it, again, just for sanity's sake. Let's just print it out just to make sure we're not doing anything super horrible. Okay, perfect. So that looks great. And then you can see right here, it is formatted as well. So that is awesome. Everything's going smoothly. So now what we're going to be doing, news article, don't care about that right now. So what we're going to be doing next is we're now going to start moving gears, and we're going to start working with Adobe. So in order to do that, let me first check and see how long this has been. Ooh, my bad. Okay, yeah, I'm cutting it off here. So in the next video, we're going to shift gears, and we're going to start working with our Adobe application. And with the Adobe application, really the whole goal is to start grabbing different parts of our artboard. With that being said, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing if you find the content useful, or if you have suggestions for more content. I'm always open to hearing that. I have a nice little list going. And if you do subscribe, also make sure to mark the GitHub repo and follow the Facebook page, because I'm assuming you want the code that you're watching. So make sure you follow me on GitHub, just so that way, as I push out new repositories, then I'm not, you're not getting left behind or anything like that. And then same thing with Facebook, because sometimes I work with PowerPoint stuff and Excel stuff, and it's just easier to post it there. So with that being said, we will see you in the next video. Thanks again for watching, everybody.